Morning is read from the 12th chapter of the Gospel according to St. Luke. The words of Jesus, I came to bring fire to the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. I have a baptism with which to be baptized, and what stress I am under until it is completed. Do you think that I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son and son against father, mother against daughter and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. He also said to the crowds, when you see a cloud rising in the west, you immediately say, it's going to rain, and so it happens. When you see the south wind blowing, you say, there will be scorching heat, and it happens. You hypocrites! You know how to interpret the appearance of earth and sky, but why do you not know how to interpret the present time? This is the gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. So again, I want to say, what a tremendous honor and sacred privilege it is to be invited to be your pastor for the coming year. To be perfectly honest, when I retired, I said, I'm never going to go back to work. And as I mentioned to one person, I mentioned that to one person earlier this morning, he said, you should never say never when it comes to God. I guess I've learned that lesson. In fact, I've been asked several times if I would consider taking other positions, and I said no to each one, because, to be honest with you, just having too much fun in retirement. I love my grandkids. My Bishop Chris called me and asked if I would consider putting my name in to be the interim pastor here. Something about being here just felt right. So here I am. And I tell you, I'm really looking forward to the challenges and blessings of being here, whatever those may be. In the year ahead, I'm sure there will be some mystery involved in that, some surprises, and that's great. I'm eager to get to know you, and I am determined as best I am able, with God's help, of course, to be a pastor for you. So thank you again for inviting Jill and me to be among you, and we look forward to getting to know you and spending this year with you. I had to laugh when weeks ago I took a quick peek at the gospel reading that I would be asked to speak on today. I was hoping for something a whole lot more gospel-y, something more upbeat. Maybe those wonderful words from 1 Corinthians, faith, hope, and love abide, these three, but the greatest of these is love. Or maybe those wonderful words from the prophet Jeremiah, oh, the plans I have for you, plans to give you a future filled with hope. Those verses or others like them might have been used to hold up before you today. I could stand here and say, these could be our theme verses for the year. What beautiful verses. But no. Instead, we get these words of Jesus. Do you think that I have come to bring peace to the earth? No, but rather division. Good gracious! What am I supposed to do with that, especially on this first Sunday when I'm trying to make a good impression here? Hopefully those words of Jesus won't be used by you a year from now to describe what my time with you was like. Well, I thought about those words, and I thought, what am I going to do with them? And then all of a sudden, a very curious thing hit me, as if I think I've been here before. And I went back and looked, and sure enough, every time I've started a new ministry in a church, these are the scripture words that I've gotten. I kid you not. My very first Sunday as an ordained pastor at Messiah Lutheran Church in Auburn, Washington, these were the scripture words. In my second church, Faith Lutheran Church in Shelton, Washington, again, these were the first words I had to preach on. Turns out they were also the first words I had to preach on when I was an intern pastor, brand new and assigned to Faith Lutheran Church in Hamilton, Montana, with Pastor Greg Carlsgott, who today is one of my good friends. But I swear, Pastor Carlsgott probably looked at those gospel verses and said, I'm not going to do that. Let's let the new intern take those. So that's what I had to do my very Now here we go again. Do you think that I have come to bring peace to the earth? Jesus said, no, but rather division. He went on to say, I tell you from now on, entire households will be completely divided. Great. Just great. What an auspicious way to start my time with you. It would be easy, and I confess to you, it's been rather tempting, to maybe just disregard those words, ignore them, and maybe instead choose some verses, other verses in the Bible that are a whole lot more beautiful and inspiring. And then I got to thinking, no, there must be a reason that these words are part of our lectionary, that we're supposed to hear them, listen to them, pay attention to them. So maybe, just maybe, there's something in them that we need to hear, we could stand here today. Something that might even set the table and the tone for our time here. So let's go for it. Let's take the risk of taking these difficult words of Jesus and rather ignoring them, let's just face them head on and see where they might lead us. So I'm going to start by asking you a question. The question is a pretty easy one. Have you ever been under a lot of stress? I mean a huge amount of stress. Now I won't ask the question, I won't ask you to raise hands this morning, but if I did ask you to raise hands, my guess is that almost every person, every hand in the room would go up saying, oh yeah, I've been under a lot of stress. There was a time, and you could tell a story. But now let me ask you a much more difficult question. Have you ever noticed that when you are under one of those times of intense stress, that you tend to take it out on the people you love the most? We might not be so quick to put our hands in the air and admit to that, because quite frankly, it would be embarrassing and humiliating to admit it. But my guess is a whole lot of you know that that's true. Studies, in fact, have shown that it seems to be a part of our very human DNA that we are hardest on the people that we're closest to when we experience times of high anxiety and stress and emotion. I'm not sure why that is. It's certainly not a very pleasant thought. But from my own observation, it seems to be abundantly true. And I'm sad to say it happens in my own life. And here's the thing, no matter how many times I say, I'm not going to ever let that happen again, guess what? It happens. So I ask you, if Jesus was fully human, which we say he was, and fully divine, do you think it's at all possible that Jesus, in one of his very human moments, acted out of a deep, intense stress when he spoke the words that he spoke in today's gospel? In fact, he even said it himself in verse 50. He said, what stress I am under until it's completed. And that's certainly understandable. After all, this is part of his journey to the cross. He was on his way to Jerusalem and to his death. The many conflicts and the confrontations that he had that he'd been facing were now starting to boil over into a pretty serious plot to take his life. He knew that soon he would be facing the excruciating nails of the cross. He would be humiliated. He would be disowned and betrayed by those who were closest to him. Is it possible that the weight and the pressure of all of that finally started to tear at his very human side, so much so that he just grew up? Do you think that I've come to bring peace to the earth? He said, no, I tell you, rather division. From now on, 5 in one household will be divided. 3 are going to be against 2, and 2 are going to be against 3. He went on to say that mothers and fathers would be against children, and mothers-in-law against their daughters-in-law, and so on. Not very nice words, not very fun words. In fact, extremely difficult words, harsh words, divisive words, even ugly words. I think we do, by and large, try to avoid conflict and division in our families and in our relationships and in the church. And yet, here's Jesus warning us that conflict is a very real part of what it means to be in a relationship. When we try to make sense of our faith, especially in our life together, whether in our families, our churches, words are difficult, to be sure, but here's the thing. Don't you have to admit that, to some degree at least, aren't his words also very true? I'm sorry to say that I know a whole lot of what Jesus speaks today. I know how families can be divided by matters of faith. I know something of the heartbreak that these divisions carry. And though the life of Jesus was and is meant to unite, it doesn't always. Sometimes it does exactly what Jesus says it will do. My niece Susan and I were the very closest of friends. She was born the oldest child of my older brother Norm, and so she was only 6 years younger than I. And since my mother babysat her for much of her young life, I became very close to my niece Susan. In fact, we were more like brother and sister than uncle and niece. We were very, very close. That relationship with Susan continued through her high school years until it was time for her to go to college. And by that time, Jill and I were living in Spokane. And Susan called and said, "I want to go to college in Spokane. Can I live with you?" And we, of course, said yes, and we welcomed her with open arms. She was such a bright kid. She was so talented. She was so smart, so motivated, so fun to be around. That's why it so completely stunned us when one day, out of nowhere, she announced that she was quitting college, quitting school, mid-year, and she was going to move to Los Angeles. Of all places, Los Angeles. Why Los Angeles? Well, we learned sometime later that she had met a young man who wanted her to come live near him, and so that's what she did. And in almost no time, they were married. What I learned a short time later was that her new husband was a member of the Church of Scientology. And so now my niece Susan was too. I can't even describe to you how much that hurt me and distressed me. Her being raised in the Lutheran church, in a Lutheran family, growing up, in fact, the daughter of a Lutheran pastor. The whole thing just didn't seem right. In fact, in my opinion, it was truly tragic. And so I had a couple things I could do. And by the way, the more I learned about Scientology, the more devastated I was. I had to do something. I either could just sit there and let it happen, or I could do something. So I said, I'm gonna go to Los Angeles. I'm gonna fly there, and I'm gonna try to make contact with her, and I'm gonna try to talk to her. So I did that. When I got there, I called and I asked her if I could take her to Disneyland, and she was glad to hear from me and glad that we could spend the day together. At the appointed time, we met inside the gates of Disneyland, right by that Main Street railway station, as many of you know where that's at. After hugging and saying hello, I told my niece Susan, I'm going to say one thing to you, Sue. And I'm just going to say it one time, and then I will promise I'll let it go. If you want to talk about it, fine, but other than that, I'll let it go, I won't say anything more, and it'll just go by fine. Okay, Uncle Steve, she said, what does it want to say? Susan, I said, your family loves you very much. I love you. My relationship with you is so important, and it upsets me so much that you've become a Scientologist. Will you please consider getting out and going back to the Christian faith in which you were raised? It doesn't even have to be Lutheran, I said. Just please get out of Scientology. Susan's face turned an angry bright red, and she shook her finger at me. If that's how you feel, she said, then you are no longer my family. You are no longer my uncle. Your mother is no longer my grandmother. I've had it with all of you. You no longer belong to me. And with that, she walked away. She didn't even turn back when I asked her, Susan, please come back. Let's talk. She didn't even turn around and acknowledge me. She simply walked out of Disneyland, out of my life, and away from our family. That was 40 years ago, 1979. For the next 31 years, there was absolutely nothing but silence from her. Nothing. In those years, her father became very, very ill. Nothing. In those years, her grandmother and grandfather, whom she had been very, very close to, died. She didn't respond in even the simplest of ways when informed of their deaths. As far as she was concerned, you see, the moment I challenged her religion that day at Disneyland, everyone in our family died. I found out later that that's what was expected of her and asked of her of Scientology. And sadly, she obliged. And I can tell you it devastated me, and it devastated us. So you see, I know something about how families can be divided by matters of faith. I know way too much from first-hand experience about what Jesus speaks of today. It was Benjamin Franklin who once said, "In this world, nothing can be said for certain except death and taxes." Well, maybe today we should add to that list stress. Because stress is something that we all experience as human beings. It's inevitable as we're pulled so many different directions by schedules and responsibilities and commitments and pressures and school and work and family life and expectations, by burdens and challenges that seem sometimes so enormous that it feels more than we can possibly do. Jesus knew that. He knew it firsthand. He knew that this is the very stuff that life is made of. Tough decisions, tough challenges, tough situations. We say it in our creeds each and every week that God became human in Jesus for the very purpose of knowing and experiencing fully what it means to be human. Well, he sure did that, didn't he? He experienced every part of being human, its foibles, its flaws, its temptations, its stresses, the ups and downs of human emotion. Now, most likely, none of us will ever have to face crucifixion. But some of us have had to face, and even now are facing, terminal illness, or loss of a job, or inadequate income, or deep loneliness, or grief, or difficult family situations, or other stresses and challenges that the rest of us can only imagine. Here's the thing I think today's gospel words invite us to remember. Just when you're feeling pulled beyond what you think you could ever endure, remember that Jesus has been there too. Wherever you are in life, whatever it is that you might be feeling or experiencing, he's been there and he's done that. And here's why that's good news. Just as there was hope even when Jesus died on the cross and when he was put in the grave, so also there is hope in your most difficult moments. In the same way that Jesus once felt abandoned and discovered how God never could or would abandon him or leave him alone, so also God will never leave you. The promise of the whole gospel, in fact, is that nothing in all creation can ever take God's love and grace away from you. Ever, ever, nothing. You always have had and you always will have God's presence in every moment of your life, whether you feel it or not. Oh, sure, I admit it's not always easy to convince ourselves of it. We don't always live as if we have God's presence and deepest peace. Sometimes we just lose sight of it. We doubt the promises and presence of God. We get stuck in the rat race and the muck of each day, and we find ourselves distracted from the beauty of God's love and grace. And just maybe that's what Jesus saw. Maybe he noticed that. Maybe he noticed our tendency to get sidetracked. Maybe he could see that his very presence wasn't calming people, but rather was stirring them up. In fact, stirring up some of the ugliest parts of human nature, turning people against one another, dividing families, making friends argue, causing huge battles among even the best and most religious of people, leading them to hurt one another, name call, and so on, for the sake of proving, I'm right. Those kinds of conversations still stir up families and friends and churches, don't they? Just as they did with me and my niece, Susan. Maybe ultimately that's where we should let today's gospel take us. Maybe his words about division should be a challenge to us not to let faith divide us. Remembering how richly God has poured grace into our lives, maybe we should let our graced selves enter into a new kind of living where we as individuals and households, and yes, as a church family, where we refuse to let divisive words and thoughts have the final say. Instead, maybe we should actively take steps to heal old hurts and dedicate ourselves to not creating new ones. Maybe we should recommit ourselves to being the very best we can be in our relationships with the people we love most, the people we've never even met, with each other, whoever we are. To be the best that we can be when it comes to living together as the people of Christ Lutheran Church in Libby, Montana. 9 years ago, I flew back to Los Angeles. After checking into a hotel, I looked up my niece Susan's phone number on a Church of Scientology website. 3 times I dialed her number, 3 times I put the phone back down because, frankly, I was afraid. I was afraid of what she would say. I was afraid of what might happen. I was afraid of what I might say. But the 4th time I let the phone ring, a woman answered. I said, "Is Susan there?" She said, "This is Susan." I said, "Susan, this is your Uncle Steve." For several seconds, there was complete silence on the other end of the line. Before finally, there was a huge scream. And to be honest with you, I don't know if that was bad or if that was good. She said, "You have no idea, Uncle Steve, how many times I've wanted to call you, but I never had the courage." Since that call, these 9 years have been wonderful as we've spoken regularly about our lives and our families. Though I have to tell you, to this day we still can't talk about faith and religion because we both know it will drive us apart again. Jesus was absolutely right. When you listen for the guiding and the leading of God and do your best to follow, you may indeed find yourself at odds with those most dear. Father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, daughter-in-law against mother-in-law, uncle against niece, niece against uncle. It's not as if we're hopeless to do anything about that, though it may not be easy. But when all else fails, please remember this. In the midst of your most awkward and difficult stresses, whatever they might be, God holds you and cares for you and strengthens you and walks with you and promises to lead you through whatever your struggle